Well, I mean, just for those that don't know, so we organise all of the LCTO events and have done since 2010. And we do run events for lots of our other communities. So we've actually got 13 running at the moment. So we've got the Milestone London AI, Aspiring Women Speakers and Principals, the London Java community, Front Engineers London, Lundroid as well. So plenty of different communities that we're involved in. But despite all of this work, we are at our core a tech recruitment company, but we use our links in the community and the networks that we get from that to help scale startups, larger companies, early stage startups as well. But the larger companies we've helped to scale are Expedia, Nutmeg, Skyscanner, Visa, ITV, BBC, lots of very well-known companies that we've helped to scale their teams. I mean, for example, I've placed quite a few engineers at Visa recently. I've worked with the CTO really closely on building their platform engineering team. And at the moment, I'm helping a Y Combinator-backed healthcare startup to grow their engineering team as well. Cover all different kind of languages as well. While we have that LJC, the London Java community, we do also cover .NET and C#, Python, PHP and Laravel, TypeScript and JavaScript, Java obviously, and other JVM languages as well. So yeah, we do, while this is the London CTOs community, we do also cover roles across the UK. So not just focused on London. So yeah, so if anyone is struggling to hire, that tends to be where we get brought in the most, where a company is struggling to find talent in a particular area, or maybe it's a little bit more of a niche or needs a bit more of a targeted approach, or those that just don't have the time to do the recruitment. So yeah, if anyone's hiring or has plans to hire, just let me know. I'd be happy to jump on a call. No need to sort of pull the trigger on roles straight away. I'm always happy to just give a bit of a flavour for the market and that sort of thing. So yeah, right at the moment, I'll drop my LinkedIn into the chat. If anyone wants to connect and have a conversation, please do. So yeah, so I'll shut up now and I'll hand you over to Ken. Yeah, take it away, Ken. Really looking forward to the talk.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So I kind of picked up a bit of a big subject to go and get our teeth into today, which is kind of bigger than most. I'm just trying to get my slides to move around. There we go. So talking about really about technology strategy and really how you get started on it. And there's a couple of disclaimers that I'm going to put in straight away. The first one is that none of this is new. And that kind of sounds strange, but there is, if anything like me, and you're maybe hooked into LinkedIn far more than you should be, there is thought leadership all over LinkedIn. And if you kind of listen to everything in LinkedIn, you'd think that there's a lot of new stuff around that constantly keeps coming up about things like strategy. From my experience, I've spent about 12 years as CTO. None of this is new. None of it actually goes far back pre-LinkedIn. The other thing, the disclaimer, is that there's a huge amount of content that I'm going to share today. I'm breaking all the rules on don't use bullet points, don't use more than 3 bullet points on a slide, and so on, because it is a very big subject. So I'm not expecting that everyone's going to be writing all this down. If you go into the chat, I've shared this content at the top of the chat. So you've got this slide deck. I'm really going to talk through it. You can take it away. You can share it. You can line your hamster cage with it. You can kind of do what you want with it. But hopefully there's some things in here which, particularly for those people that are coming in as a new CTO, might actually start to give them some pointers, but more importantly, actually give them some confidence. The last one, obviously, is there are a lot of good resources out there. There are a heck of a lot of good stuff out there on strategy. I'm not going to, by any means, cover it, but I am going to give you a few things that I've used over 12 years that I think add a huge amount of value. So about me, like being outdoors, I'm a problem solver. If anybody asks what I do and I try and explain what the role of a CTO is, normally it's a lot easier to just say, I'm a problem solver. I love working with software teams. I love helping scaling businesses grow fast. I'm passionate about seeing teams learn, and I'm passionate about seeing people succeed. The quote that I bore people with the most, because I'm going to bore people with it today, is this: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And I think that holds true in life, whether you're a CTO or whether you're planning to go and kayak for 3 weeks around the west coast of Scotland. You've got to have a strategy. You've got to have some kind of vision, but you've also got to have some tactics of what you need to do to prepare and what you're going to do when you actually get there. So why this talk, which is quite a big one? I once wrote my first technology strategy. You may be a CTO that's done the same, in which case you may have very different experiences from me. You may be an aspiring CTO, or you're thinking about whether a CTO is a role for you, and actually you're not sure what actually entails to get there and whether you've got the capability to do it. Through London CTOs, so big shout out to them for today, but also through their Meet to Mentor group. I also mentor 5 or 6 CTOs. And there are common questions that I always seem to get from particularly CTOs who are fairly new in their journey. How do I write my first technology strategy? And how do I become more strategic? And the two actually go very much hand in hand. If you start to think about how you write your technology strategy, you will become more strategic. You'll become more strategic by thinking about what your technology strategy actually is. But I think one of the big gaps in there is people's understanding, even today, of what strategy is. I'm also doing this as a bit of personal therapy. I read comments like this on LinkedIn, and then have to kind of go outside and go for a walk. Because when I was sitting down writing my first technology strategy, comments like that made no sense to me, and they didn't help me one jot actually try and move a problem that I had. How am I taking all of these issues and risks and problems I have in a technology business and try and put some kind of control around it and make it predictable and make it scale? So good strategy, in my opinion, enables you and your team to work on the right things. It enables you to deliver value to your customers and to achieve your business goals. That's it, as far as I can say. It's that simple. Bad strategy will give your customer a poor experience and will lead to a multitude of internal problems. But the two of them are very much hand in hand, what you see in businesses. So in less than 1 hour, we're going to try and do what is a technology strategy, or what is a strategy. A critical part of that, I think, is understanding the role of the CTO. And I think a lot of people who are new into the role maybe haven't quite thought of some very basic premises around the role. What should go into a technology strategy? What shouldn't really go into it? How do you start it? How do you keep it on track? How do you deliver it? And out of that, hopefully, how do I become more strategic in my thinking when I'm actually taking on a leadership role within the business? So the first one there is your role as a CTO. You may have come from a CTO you may have come to the CTO background having been a technologist, you may have been a developer, a tester, you may have been an engineer of some sort, and come to it from a very, very technical background. And either the business has moved up and scaled and you've just been shoehorned up into that role, or you may have come to it from a more non-technical background. My background, I came to it from being a developer many, many years ago. I then moved up into development project management because I was actually more interested in how do you solve problems with this for the customer? I've got a great bunch of technical people here who can build anything, but there's no coordination in actually how they deliver value. So my role was to come actually through project management, development project management, having been a developer and being able to empathize with how developers work. So it's important to think, what is your role as a CTO? Because as you step into that role, the requirements of the role fundamentally change from where you were previously. If you're in a very technical person, as you move into the CTO, you are no longer necessarily going to be the most technical person in the room. You're going to start to become more of a problem solver. And a lot of that problem solving that I've seen over the last 12 years can be addressed through decent strategy. So how do you add value as the CTO? There's lots of articles I've read around imposter syndrome, which is basically people not being confident on whether they've actually got the skills to do the particular role. Are they going to be found out? Am I good enough to do this in the first place? And I think firstly, understanding what your role is and who your role really is related to is a key step forward. I always assumed the CTO was the brightest technical guy in the room. 12 years on, I understand that it is definitely not that. It's probably the opposite of that. So as a CTO, you're going to have to wear 2 hats primarily in the business. You're going to have to wear a business leadership hat, which I always think of as being the C. You're now sitting at the C level. And you're going to have to wear a technology enabler hat, not necessarily a top technology manager hat, but an enabler hat, which is the T. That means you're not just responsible for the technology team anymore. If you're going to sit in a C level, you're responsible for the business strategy at the same level as everybody else in the organization, whether that's the CEO, the COO, the CFO, whatever Cs you have within your business, you have a responsibility for delivery of the business strategy to its stakeholders, to its shareholders. As part of that, with your T hat on, you've also got responsibility for the technology strategy. How, from a technology part of the business, as opposed to finance or as opposed to, say, marketing, how from the technology team are you going to enable that business strategy to happen? They're your two primary goals. You're not there, and I've seen this in some organizations, you're not there to build a technology empire and then fight for it in leadership meetings. And unfortunately, I've seen CTOs that have done that, and the business has generally struggled as a result of it. So if you're coming new into the role, I think there's kind of two bits of advice that I'd probably give. And one is, firstly, just be brave. Most businesses actually need simplicity, not complexity. A lot of technical people come up into a leadership role and they believe that they'll have credibility by being highly technical, by talking in a very technical language and obfuscating everything that they say, and that people will respect them for it. Actually, your job is to simplify all of that. Help people to understand where you're going to deliver value that will deliver the business goals, and the complex bit can sit within your technology world. That's why you hire good technical people. The second one is actually, how do you get focus as the CTO? How do you know what you should be working on and what shouldn't you be working on? And for me, strategy done well will give you that structure to be able to run your organization and will give you the focus to what you should be working on. So don't be afraid of stepping into that CTO role, but don't fall into some of the kind of common anti-patterns of, that means I now have to build a technical domain. That's not what you're there for. The other kind of thing to be kind of aware of, and I think to just be confident on if you go into that CTO role, is that the first technology strategy is usually the hardest. Usually because the first time you're writing a technology strategy is the first time the business is actually writing a business strategy. So rather than following in the footsteps and following a very strong model of how you're going to do your strategy and deliver it, often for a new CTO, we often start our roles in relatively small businesses. They're businesses that are probably trying to grow very quickly. They've gone through maybe some kind of startup culture, and now they've realized that they're needing to scale. They may be running into issues, and they've decided that putting together some kind of strategy is the way forward. You're starting from a blank sheet of paper, so it's going to be difficult. So therefore, hopefully, what I'm going to show you today is that by taking a few simple steps and doing a few simple things, you can get started on your kind of strategy journey. And you will then evolve that as you start to learn more from it. You're going to be fighting against culture and fighting against legacy, not legacy of applications and products, but you're going to be fighting against a legacy of particular cultures. And I've seen these in various organizations that I've worked with. That startup culture, we don't do strategy, let's just do this. Let's just stay as a startup. Let's have that startup feel when 5 of us sat around the table. When you're going to move to be a business of 20, 30, 50, 200 people, that's not going to work anymore. You're going to have some level of strategy. And we'll talk about what strategy is. The sales culture, just build it, don't ask questions. This customer needs this, just build it and get it out the door as fast as you can. That's not scalable. Again, I've seen that work in businesses where they may be building a product being driven by their customers, but at some point you have too many customers and you can't service that. The entrepreneurial culture, we've all worked with probably founders and entrepreneurs, bless them, we love them really. They're the people that drive the ideas. They're the people we need to come up with the ideas and the courage to take these businesses forward. But they're often the hardest people to work with when you need to actually put some structure and control in. Yes, we built this today, but I've got a great new idea. Let's change it. Let's go build something else. And the final one is to fight against, actually, often is the internal drive that comes from people who have come from a technology background. I worked with a business who their technical team fundamentally believed that if we just build it, customers will come. They didn't, as you can imagine. Therefore, they had to actually put in a proper strategy and kind of break down that culture that technology was the rule of everything in there. If you're going to make a step change in your business, if you're going to scale your business, if you really want to go onto that growth curve, you're going to have to start doing things differently. If you've always do what you've always done, etc., etc. So your first technology strategy is often the hardest one you're going to have to deal with. There's a few challenges I've chucked in here as well to go away and think about. Challenge number one, entrepreneurs are not strategists. I've worked with a couple of entrepreneurs who just simply didn't understand why we couldn't build 5 things at the same time. They simply didn't understand why the thing they asked for 3 months ago and then decided to change their mind about had meant that we'd lost 3 months of development time on every other thing that we were working on. They're not strategists, they're ideas people. They're going to come up with 100 ideas a week. You are going to have to learn as a CTO to handle them and to handle them gently. Otherwise, as in this picture, they will probably leave your team battered and exhausted. And that's often the trade-off I've seen in very entrepreneurial-led businesses. So you're coming in often to bring that level of control in so that an entrepreneur can get their vision over the line, but in a more controlled way. You're going to be saying no to them more than you're saying yes to them. You're going to have to learn how to handle them. It's just part of the job. So good strategy enables success. A very quick case study. This is probably the best example I have of good strategy. I've worked with lots of businesses. They've had different strategic goals and visions. They've gone down lots of different routes of how to enable those. They've invested a huge amount in doing things like OKRs and whatever it might be. But they've often not achieved things because they never actually had a decent strategic goal in the first place. I worked with a business a few years ago. They had one strategic goal. I joined as the CTO. I asked the founders what their goal was for the business. They looked at each other and said, we want to double the turnover of the business in 2 years, exit the business, and the 2 of us don't ever want to work again. That was the best strategic goal I've ever been given as a CTO. Why? Because we could understand that had a very clear outcome. So that our strategy needed to address, where are we today? We're going to go through an exit. What do we need to look like? What needs to be done to get from where we are today to get to that exit point? What are the clearly defined objectives with measures that need to be put in place to meet that goal? The outcomes of that, we were a kind of a product business. We did a fair bit of bespoke work for different customers. We knew in order to scale and grow, we had to change that into being a SaaS product. We had to design and restructure our business. We had to understand what key building blocks we needed to put in place to scale. We had a really clear focus. We are going to go through an exit. We are going to go through some kind of due diligence. To get to that, we have to drive customer growth. We have to drive customer satisfaction, and so on and so on and so on. So the key thing for me there was that without that strategic goal, if that strategic goal of the founders had been very similar to lots of other goals, we are going to be the market leading product in X. We are going to be the global leader in this product Y. You generally look at those kind of visions and say, well, that's a vision, but what are we actually going to do to achieve that? So the first one really is to understand is good strategy will drive success of the business. Bad strategy, when I've seen companies that have very poor strategy, generally struggle. They're generally the organizations that get stuck or they kind of hit the ceiling. They're trying to scale. They don't have clear objectives. The business is growing. They don't have a really clear direction for people. And if people don't understand where they're going, they're not going to be probably working on the right things. So what is strategy? This is going to be teaching a few people to suck eggs, I'm sure, but that's fine. But I think it's important because, again, go back to my first CTO role, and I would probably have had a bit of a stab in the dark as to what strategy is. Most businesses are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to make money, hopefully grow it, hopefully grow the business. They're trying to reduce their costs, increase their profit, be more efficient, scale at pace, and so on. And they're trying to mitigate risks. They're trying not to die in the process of doing all those things. The business strategy is simply the blueprint of how you are going to achieve those three. Your technology strategy is the blueprint of how technology will play its part in making that strategy happen. To do that, when I've talked to people about strategy and I've developed strategies with businesses, it's not just about creating that vision and creating some lofty goals at the end of it and then saying to people, right, crack on, you've got a vision, go for it. I worked with one organization where they set some very lofty goals and then gave those to the business and then said, go and write all of your OKRs to meet these goals. And then kind of missed the point that nobody actually understood what those goals were in the first place. But they were insisting on, well, I don't care, just go and write your OKRs and give us your OKRs. So that's a real kind of junk in, junk out kind of approach to doing strategy. The first thing is, what do you want to achieve as a business? What are your clear goals? We want to double the size of this business and exit it in 2 years' time. That's a pretty clear goal. The vision might have been, we want to scale and be a market leader in this business. 12 years on, that business is still going. It's been through a couple of investment rounds and a couple of ownerships. It's significantly bigger. It's scaled significantly over the last 10 years. And it's still very, very successful as an organization. But it started with that really clear goal. What's the next big milestone we need to meet? Not just a big lofty vision of kind of global dominance. The second part, which I think most businesses miss when they're doing the strategy, is where are we today on that journey? What is our current state? A lot of business will say, here's the goal, go for it. And the business actually then just carries on doing what it always done, kind of the same boring quote. So the first part of that is, where are you actually today? Are you actually good at what you do? And there's nothing wrong with putting your hand up and saying that you're not. So the first thing is, what's your current state? Are you in the right state to be able to go on the journey before you've even started on it? If I had jumped in the west coast of Scotland probably 3 years before I actually did, I probably would have had a pretty early visit from the lifeboat to come and pick me up. It probably took me, I've done various trips up the west coast of Scotland, solo in a sea kayak, and it probably took me 3 years of understanding, what are my current skills? I'm actually capable of doing this. What do I need to learn? What things could possibly go wrong before I can actually start on that journey? So where are you today? Are you actually fit for purpose? Is your current state going to take you to where you want to get to? Excuse me. Out of that, you'll start to identify things that need to happen. So, okay, where am I today? What things need to happen? What are the tactics that are going to happen to get to the goals? Those tactics could be, I need to start working on something new. It could be, I've actually got to go and fix a ton of stuff in my current state before I can really get that journey underway. The fourth piece of that is then also an operating model. How are you actually going to make it happen? And the reason why I kind of stress that one as well is, again, that you see a lot of organizations that will go, we have a strategy, we have a document, we've shared it with the business, it's our vision, and it's some lofty goals. And then they hand that over to the business. It doesn't actually give anybody any clear view at all on how you're actually going to get there. How are you going to make it happen literally on a daily basis? It's usually just thrown at people and said, there's the goals, go do them. Think about organizations you work for. How many companies have you worked for have had goal setting, an off-site, strategy day, whatever it might be, and then the leadership team get together at the general annual meeting and somebody puts the goals up on the wall, and then we say, how did we get on with our goals to meet our vision for this year? Did we meet them all? Didn't we meet them all? How do we think we've done? And people often look at them and kind of start puzzling over, well, we kind of did that one, or no, we kind of ditched that one 6 months ago. That is not how to run a business. That's not how to meet your vision and meet your goals. You have to be managing these things literally on a daily and weekly basis. I'm going to share about five kind of references in here. And this is probably one of my favorites, which is The Build Trap by Melissa Perry. My background is generally around product software businesses, so it's about product strategy, but actually it's also about strategy. And it talks a lot of sense about strategy. So we've talked already about, you've got a vision where you want to get to. You've got some goals, intermediate goals, which is your challenge, which Melissa Perry talks about. But you may not actually know how to get there in one go. And that's okay. Look at the way that the product management does it. How do you establish what maybe a target condition is? What do you need to learn about that target condition before you can meet it? You're not going to go from A to B in one go. You're going to get there in a little bit of an ad hoc way. But if you do it sensibly and start to set some intermediate goals, then you're starting to develop an operating model. What are we going to do in the next quarter to meet that goal? What are we going to do in the next month to meet that target condition for the next quarter? What are we going to do this week to meet that target condition for this month, for this quarter? So starting to break it down and starting to find a way of actually how you manage them on a daily basis becomes your operating model. And again, I stress it here because I've seen so many companies that simply don't have one. They set goals And then they just step back and assume that somehow these things are going to actually happen. Your second challenge I put as a CTO is the kind of, it's not my problem challenge. The board wants one. We're getting bigger. We need to tell people something. How many times have you sat in a leadership team and said, we should really do kind of the annual company meeting, and we need to tell them where we're going next year. Okay, we'd better write a strategy. Or we're heading towards an exit. We probably need to do an investment in 1 to 2 years' time. Actually, they'll want some kind of strategy document. We'd better write a strategy, which obviously isn't the reason for doing one. As a CTO, if you're in an organization that isn't very clear on strategy, it's very easy to sit back and say, it's not my problem, it's the board's problem, it's the CEO's problem. The challenge I've always kind of set for myself in a business is, as the CTO, can you clearly describe where the business is trying to get to your team? And can you give a commitment back to the business that you will get it there? The second one is, can your teams play it back to you? If I went to anyone in your organization and said, what are the key business goals for this year? What are your business goals for the next quarter? And how are you as a team building those? Could they all just play them back to you and say, yeah, we understand what they all are. We understand exactly what they are. That's what our focus is. This is how we manage and monitor those goals. This is how we get to them. And the things they're going to do to get to them are going to be their tactics. Are the tactics that you're doing adding enough value? That's another key question, I think, from a CTO. For me, it's not my problem. If it's not your problem, you will tend to fall back to what you've always done, which tends to be the way that you always built your products, which might be good. There might be challenges in there. It's the same thing. If you always do what you always done, you'll always get what you always got. Keep challenging as a CTO. Do we really understand where we're trying to get to? Do my teams really understand where we're trying to get to? Are the tactics that they're using actually adding value to get us towards those business goals? Or are they just busy? Or are they just doing cool tech stuff? The two need to go hand in hand. I said none of this is new. If you want thought leadership, you can go back 2,500 years. This is Sun Tzu, who's a Chinese philosopher who wrote a book called The Art of War, which was about strategy and tactics of war. And if you read any of that, it's worth having a look at it. Actually, it's on. You'll Google it and you'll find it. I think it's on Wikipedia, and there's a translation on there. You'll read most of it and just say, this applies to just about every company and every software company that I've ever worked in. And they talk about their strategy and tactics. Strategy without tactics and tactics without strategy. You need to have the two hand in hand. I think they'd worked that out 2,500 years ago, so it's probably quite good advice. The second book I'd go and get your hands on, which I think is a fantastic read. It's an interesting read. It's a good, compelling read as well. He's a very good writer. Is a guy called Richard Rummelt, who wrote a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And this is a key one that I think, as a CTO sitting in your leadership role, you are going to have to sit and challenge bad strategy. I think as leaders, when we look back, I look back in hindsight, I've probably seen far more bad strategy. I may even been part of it. Than good strategy. And I think it's a challenge to go and actually have the guts to stick your head above the parapet and actually challenge it. It's that kind of gibberish. It's things that sound fantastic, strategic concepts, arguments, and you listen to them and go, that sounds fantastic. And then you play it back to yourself and go, but I'm not really sure actually what it means. It's that failure to actually face up to the challenge. What is the objective? What actually really is the objective that we're trying to meet? Richard Rummelt talks about bad strategy and talks about blue sky thinking. This is some strategy that came from a company I worked with. Their vision was to be the Google for data for the industry they were in, which is fun. You listen to that and go, that's fantastic. I haven't got a clue what that means. Their strategic goals were the ones on the left-hand side. And you can read them and go, yeah, they make perfect sense to a software product company that's scaling rapidly and expanding globally. But I could probably also apply that to my local supermarket or to my local corner shop, some of it. It skips over the annoying fact that no one's got a clue how to get there. It doesn't mean a thing to us in the business. It sounds great. It's every other strategic goal we've ever seen in every other company we've worked in. And usually these things come from, let's have a strategy day, let's do a bit of brainstorming, let's have a big lunch in the middle, and then let's write down some strategic goals. your strategic goals need to be really well aligned with where you're trying to get to. Go back to our example of our founders doing exit in 2 years. Those were not our strategic goals to do that. So you need to get really laser focused. And to do that, you need to kind of have the guts to stick your head above the parapet and challenge when you see these kind of things. We're going to deliver exceptional long-term value. How much? To who? By when? And actually really get people to break these down. Okay, so your value is going to be this amount that's going to come across in revenue this year. What does that mean for the first 6 months? What does that mean for the first quarter? Okay, now I can start to understand from a technology side, what does that mean from what I need to deliver? Is it projects? Is it infrastructure? What are the tactics I'm going to have to employ to actually go and deliver those strategic goals? But you have to sit and challenge and demand good goals, or your technology strategy isn't really going to be worth anything. So building your first one, which I think is the first thing we really want to get to. The first thing that I always think to people about is how are you going to visualize it? And the first thing for me is really about building a framework. And that framework is going to be yours. There isn't really a one size fits all, but it's going to be a whole combination of, big scale down to small scale. What are your business goals? Who are your customers? What are the products that you're developing? How do you actually deliver value to your customers in the first place? That can then fall down to your technology goals. How are we going to enable that our customers get value, our products get value, and we can meet our business goals? You'll take it down another level. What are the individual technology strategies? What are the pillars of the business, the things we need to be good at in order to meet those technology goals? I put some there. You can easily just add to them and put whatever are those key pillars that sit within your business. Is it product? Is it about engineering? Is it about infrastructure? Is it about security, people, other stuff? There'll be lots of other elements of that you can put in. Excuse me. There's then a bucket on the side, which I've kind of called enablers and distractions. In technology businesses, innovation always becomes part of the strategy. The board always want to know, what are we doing about innovation? Are we looking at new technology? What are the partnerships that we're developing to take the business forward? And these could be enablers, but they can also be massive distractions. And again, without those technology goals, is the innovation that you are thinking about doing, is that actually going to add significant enough value to meet your technology goals? Everybody wants to innovate. Everybody loves new technology. If you're in a technology business, make sure those become enablers and they don't just become distractions. I've worked with another organization who probably had the best, the smoothest running, the most slick technology function I had ever seen. The ability to deploy software, the quality of software that came out of the team was second to none. It was by far the strongest development and delivery capability I think I'd ever seen out of a business. Innovation was superb, always looking at new technology, hadn't delivered to a product to a customer for 3 months. So actually weren't delivering the business goal. The business goals weren't being met. The leadership team were frustrated, and so on and so on. So that balance had really swung over to, we're focused on innovation, new technology, instead of actually within the strategy being focused on, is this actually going to meet our technology goals, which have to meet our customer and our product goals, which ultimately have to meet our business goals. So by creating that framework, you start to break down in your mind, what are the components that make up my business? And then you can start to assess them. Are they fit for purpose? What do I need to do with them to actually meet those goals? Out of that also usually comes an operating model, or should come an operating model. I've got all these different components. How are they going to work on a daily basis? What does my leadership and my organizational structure need to look like? What are the key processes and practices that are going to add value and which ones aren't? Am I going to be wedded to a particular operating model? How am I going to manage risks and issues, and so on? So there's all these 4 components we've already started to talk about. You're now starting to visualize in something that you can actually draw on a piece of paper, draw it on a whiteboard, start to write some stuff down about it, and start to build out what that strategy looks like. The key thing that I think there is iterate. It's almost back to Melissa Perry's model on product strategy. You won't do this in one day. Too many businesses sit down and have a strategy day once a year, and think that they can plan out 365 days of unknowns, things that are going to happen that they haven't seen yet, in one day, and write a strategy. Do it very iteratively. As technologists, we're very used to kind of iterative processes. You can start to look at your business goals, start to look at your risks and issues and where you are today. Those three components alone, trying to understand all of those three, will give you a massive step forward in your ability to deliver business value. Innovation, technology, what innovation could we do to enable the goals? Not will we do, what could we do? What technology could we use? And then your operating model, how are we going to operate to drive that strategy and hit the business goals? You don't need to do it all on day one. You can start to break this down step by step and iterate your way through it. I think in reality, it probably takes 6 to 12 months for a business to really understand where its strategy is and to have a strategy that's actually now ticking over and operating well. Your challenge number 4 is to bring it to life. This is not a document that is going to go on a shelf. I've seen far too many strategy documents that are done once a year. They're printed out. They may even be handed out, bound very nicely, handed out to the business, and they never come up again. The business doesn't talk about them. The leadership team don't particularly talk about them. Your strategy is how you run your technology business. It's not just a list of stuff that you do or a list of aspirations that you might do. It's your operating model. This is your blueprint of how your technology team is going to run on a daily basis. At the point a business decides it's going to do it, I believe is one of the biggest opportunities that business then has to really grow. The moment businesses step in and actually decide that they need to start doing strategy, they need to stop and think about where they're going, and they need to stop and think about if they're really fit for purpose, I think is kind of a game changer. It's the biggest opportunity you see in organizations. It's that point where you can have, excuse me, an honest discussion about where your goals, challenge them, refine them, bring in some realism, make them something that's actually achievable. Importantly, get the business aligned with them. Again, if the people in the organization don't understand where you're going, can they really be expected to deliver value without constantly being micromanaged? It's a really good point to honestly assess where you are today, not just with processes and practices, but also with people, with structure, and with the business as a whole. What you will get out of it, good strategy gives you clarity, gives you alignment, gives you focus. If you put all those 4 components in place, you have an operating model. How do you actually deliver this week after week, month after month? But the thing that I see more and more when you sit down and do technology strategies with teams is that they start to understand that there are genuine reasons to stop doing things. They start to see that there are things in the business that aren't adding any value or adding very little value, and they stop doing them. If you think about the biggest challenge, again, go on LinkedIn, there's endless posts about it. Everybody's diaries are full. Everybody's got a calendar that's just day-to-day meetings and they've got no time to do any work. The biggest challenge organizations have is to actually stop doing stuff, to stop having particular meetings. If it doesn't add significant value to your business goal, don't do it. Focus on the things that will. And that's often a big challenge because you're breaking culture. We've always had this meeting. We've always had our big get together for 2 hours on a Wednesday with the whole technology team. Maybe it's not adding enough value. Maybe you need to stop doing it. So step 1 in creating your strategy, we talked about it before, get your goals. Have you got your business goals yet? You don't necessarily need 5-year business goals to start defining your technology goals. How far do you need to define them? How far do you need to? You might only need to define them a month or 2 ahead. If you've looked at an assessment of where you are today, you will find things that you need to stop doing. You will find things you probably need to improve. There may be some critical things on there that actually you need to solve them tomorrow that need to get onto your roadmap and onto your strategy pretty quickly. One thing I've always done with teams when you're talking about strategy is to get them to write a charter, is to say to them, these are the business goals. This is where we want to be in 12 months' time as an organization. What do you think we need to look like? And rather than get them to talk about what they do today, sit them down with a blank sheet of paper or a bunch of post-it notes and say, if I was to come in and look at this business in 1 year's time, what would be the ideal business that we would come and look at that would deliver that business value, that deliver those business goals? And very quickly, the things that your team start to write down and the post-it notes that appear and the way that that business looks in 12 months' time, they suddenly realize doesn't look like the business they're in today. But often, nobody has got an operating model to make that change. You have, you're the CTO. So write that chart is often a great way to help teams to understand what they need to look like. Your goals also need to become the most important things you need to do, not if we've got any spare time, we might do an hour on them. Your goals are about achieving your business goals, so they are the most important things. But as you said before, iterate, set them quarterly, review them, learn from them, set the next set of goals, set the next set of goals. Do Melissa Perry's model, set those little intermediate goals and work your way towards them. But make it a weekly part of your conversations. Don't make it we'll talk about them once a quarter, and then someone will go, no, I haven't really done mine yet. If these are the most important things you need to do, you need to make sure that they're getting done. The second one we talked about was audit yourself. I've got an audit template that I use. If anybody wants it, they're welcome to have it. You can take it, the format of it, but it looks something like that. You know, what's the area that we're interested in as a business? What are the kind of questions we might ask if we did an audit ourselves? What do we want to see? What does that business should look like that we want to see that's going to get to that point in B, that end goal that we're aiming at? So you can very quickly either create that audit sheet, or I say you're welcome to have mine, and you can then just do a quick audit on yourself. You know, do we get enough value doing what we do? Are there things that maybe we should be doing that we're not doing? And when we're talking about getting enough value, as that CTO head, come back to value from the customer, value from the business perspective. One of the things that I've always wrestled with as a CTO is working with technology people. Technology teams are brilliant at justifying technology solutions. But tactics without strategy, as we've seen, isn't going to get you very far. So when your technology teams are always justifying why they need to go invest in that piece of AI, and it's going to take them 3 months to do it, you have to be able to have a conversation with them that says, what does that mean for the customer? What does that mean from the business? If we're going to start doing that, what are we going to stop doing? It's very easy to build, again, that technology team without having a focus on the value to the customer. This is probably one of the biggest gaps that I've seen when I've worked with businesses and strategy, and that is risks and issues. Somebody has got to own your risks and issues. As the CTO, you have to own them. Why do you have to own them? Because, again, go back to the example of doing the exit as a business. The biggest driver to grow that business and to exit that business was customer advocacy. The fact that we could go to any of our customers and they would advocate for us, but not only that, they would also advocate to other customers. Customers talk to each other all the time. So one of your biggest revenue drivers, one of your biggest levers is your management of issues for customers, keeping customers in a good place. If I said to you as CTOs, can you give me your issues list with your top 10 issues on it? And can you give me your risk log with your top 10 risks on it and how you're mitigating them, what your plan is? I would hope you could. A lot of organizations can't. They would say, well, the issues are kind of owned by the sales guy or the CEO or the COO. You have to own your risks and issues. The main reason for that, I believe, is that they will tell you an awful lot about what you need to do next. Good example, I've worked in many businesses that have had this loop. Customer's not happy. I've been told as the CTO, it's the product, fixed development. You go in as the CTO, you have a look at your processes, you maybe wrap some project management around it. You decide you need to have more people in order to deliver quicker. You deliver a load more stuff, and the customer's still not happy. So you round the loop, you go again. And I've seen organizations that have been around this loop many, many times before they actually sit down and say, what are the root causes of our issues? They will help you find root causes, which will help you decide what needs to go in your strategy. I worked in an organization that was stuck in this loop probably for 2 years. The customer's not happy. There was a relentless drive to recruit developers so we could deliver more stuff to keep customers happy, and they were never happy. So that should tell you straight away that you're going down the wrong road with that kind of solution. The causes for that, bad expectations with customers about what they were getting, selling stuff that you don't have, and then expecting teams just to constantly deliver it. a lack of ownership of issues that have actually festered for weeks and months within the business. Sometimes it might be you haven't got a strategy for your architecture. I worked with an organization that had 5 product teams that barely spoke to each other, but they all used shared code bases. So they were constantly stepping on each other's toes, creating issues. One product would do a release, a customer on another product, guess what, would find that their product doesn't work anymore. So, that's not about fixing processes and getting more people and delivering more stuff. It's about stopping, understanding where you are today, and in that example, being not fit to move forwards until you have started to address it with your strategy. What are the tactics and goals you need to set to get control of where you are today? The fourth one is getting traction. So we've talked about setting goals and setting targets and understanding where you are today. But how do you operate on a daily basis? What does your leadership team meeting look like? How often do you set your objectives? What's the format you use for setting objectives? Getting traction is about getting an operating model that works. Goals are great if you actually deliver any. Again, how many businesses have we sat in and at the end of the year, they've reviewed their goals and gone, that was a pretty good year. We delivered 40% of our goals. Yeah, that's a car crash of a year if you've delivered 40% of your goals. If you're setting your goals properly and you want to keep that trajectory going, you should be knocking these down on a quarterly basis, time after time after time. So at that C level, do you have a repeatable operating model? Do you know what it is? Is it identifiable? There's lots of them out there. I've worked with one called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. I love it because it's so darn simple. If you go to EOS Worldwide, there's a lot of tools in there that you can look at and you can start to use some of the system that they have. There's a book called Traction. You can probably read it in a couple of days and it will probably give you a good step forward. Again, from my experience, having that operating model was a key to unlocking the strategy. If you write a strategy and you set quarterly goals, that's great. How is the business actually going to make them deliver, make them happen on a week-by-week basis? Nearly there. So some kind of often hard lessons learned. This is probably stuff that I wish I knew. I'm not sure if I'd have done anything about it, but we all kind of make mistakes and we kind of stumble through stuff and learn things that we try and spot the next time around. The first one is this one, which is the founder-driven strategy. And again, it's working with, if you're working with smaller software businesses, inevitably you're often working with very, very entrepreneurial people, and often it's the founder. They will often have an excuse for strategy. We're a startup, we're agile, so we can pivot, kind of, right? They're the kind of focus on a vision, take everybody over the hill and charge. You have a role as the CTO. You're going to have to try and manage this visionary. You're going to have to try and wrestle this person into a room and start to help give them some control. As a CTO, your solution may not actually be a technical one. The biggest control I've seen put into at least 2 very visionary entrepreneur-driven businesses with product management was actually giving an entrepreneur a product management team with good product management practices where they could experiment, understand the value to the customer before we even started delivering everything. Software development is a crazy expensive business, but yet businesses sometimes still just pour money into it. So as a CTO, you may have to be the person that has to go and work on the founder-driven strategy. You may be the person that's got to go and wrestle the founder into the room. You're going to have to be brave at some point and do it. The counter to that, and this is I've seen a few times, which is probably the one that is the hardest one to go and unpick, and this is kind of the standalone technology strategy. This is where you have CTOs that don't want to go and take the business on. They don't want to sit in the leadership team and challenge, so they tend to sit back in their comfort zone. They build great technology. They build a fantastic technology team. They have great processes, and then they tend to step into leadership meetings and protect that team to the hilt. That then becomes your de facto tech strategy, but you haven't thought about what about the customer? What about the success of the business? So this is the one that I think is the hardest one to unpick when you work with businesses, but it's usually often the more dangerous one because you end up with a very frustrated business sitting on the outskirts of this kind of ivory tower that the technology team have built. There's also well, isn't this a technology strategy? I've gone into businesses and they've said, we have a technology strategy. And you've said, great, could you share it with me? And they've said, well, we do agile. To me, that's please don't get me started. I'll be here for quite a long time. Agile is not a technology strategy. We've written OKRs. Okay, that's great, but where are you today? What about your goals? What current state are you in? How are you going to actually get from A to B? A technology radar, engineering process documentation, architecture diagrams, all of these things are tactics. They're things that you can use to drive value and to help you make decisions, but they're not your strategy. Your strategy is about how you're going to get from A to B, where are you today, and what's the operating model you're going to use to get you there. The next great read, team topologies. This is really about how are you delivering value to your customers and being brutally honest about the structure you have as an organization. Your organization shouldn't be the first thing you change as part of your strategy, but I believe it's something you should definitely go and have a good look at, because so many organizations are structured, technology organizations, in a very traditional way. We have a front-end team, we have a back-end team, we have an infrastructure team, we have an integrations team, and so on. And that's an organization I used to work with. Nobody then sits there and says, but when we're trying to build a product for the customer, how do we go about getting people from these teams to possibly sit down for long enough to actually deliver anything of value? So have you got a team within are you organized in your business? Do you have a structure that will drive that seamless flow of value from an idea through to your customer? Are your team structured in such a way you can do that? Is it focused on your customer, or is it focused on more traditionally on your technology? The best thing I've seen out of putting a structure in like team topologies is the impact it has on people, because actually it means they become a lot more engaged on what their purpose is and a lot less burnt out trying to flip between 5 or 6 different projects and never deliver any value. So team topologies is a great read. Again, as you start to put your strategy together, organizational structure actually is a reflection of a lot of other things within your business. So that's definitely a good one to go and get your teeth into. The other lesson that I struggled with was, again, it was that filling up your diary, was that once you start lifting the lid, a massive amount of stuff is going to come out of the woodwork. You are going to have to be the person who unravels the Christmas tree lights, which is a tedious job that no one ever wants. You normally throw them away and just get another one. You're going to uncover processes, practices, structure, people, technology, all these kind of things. My biggest lesson as a CTO was to go and get help, was that I don't need to be the expert in all of these things. I can be good at some of them and I can lead on some of them, but I can't expect to be the expert in all of them. My job as a CTO is to build a leadership team that is an expert and can own it and can build their teams of experts. That's probably one of the things that took me the longest to learn, kind of on that journey of understanding what a strategy was. Beware the one-liners. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've heard that quoted at me by a CEO was an excuse for why we don't have any business strategy, because Peter Drucker said we don't need one. That doesn't mean we don't need any kind of strategy. A great culture is a fantastic business asset, and a core part of your strategy will be your culture, your people, your values, the controls you put in place. Your structures are dictating, have I got the right people in the right seats to actually, for this business to operate effectively? How am I going to develop people to enable that strategy, to enable the business to meet where it wants to get to? There is often a big competition within organizations where sometimes strategy can rule everything or culture can rule everything. And I've seen organizations where they are so fixated on their culture, and their culture has been phenomenal, that they have just lost their direction on where they're actually trying to get to as a business. These two are going to compete with each other. You have to try and sit somewhere in the middle and establish a great culture with your teams. But I believe that strategy is actually a leader to do that, as opposed to not being a leader to do it. So culture may eat strategy for breakfast, but I usually means culture likes eating strategy. It likes strategy. I like Weetabix, which is why I eat it for breakfast. We're nearly done. Your solutions, the other hard lesson learned, solutions are not always technical. I think I would even expand that to say, if you can, try and find solutions that aren't technical. Technical teams love technical solutions. course they do. It's what they live for. It's why they get out of bed in the morning. Technical solutions are extremely expensive to build, implement, solve, take out, replace. But many of your solutions are going to come from other places. They're going to come from things like product teams. Again, I mentioned that was probably the biggest game changer that I've seen being put into businesses. It may come from better management of your customers, changing the other ways that other parts of the business operate. How do your sales team go about selling your product? Does it line up with how you actually deliver it? Get help will be one of my biggest things. Get a mentor. We have all had massive experience of banging our heads on walls so that you don't have to. And I think one of the things I felt when I first started as CTO was having mentors available to me was something that never even crossed my mind. I think now there's a lot more drive to it kind of culturally. And finally, work as a team. That sounds incredibly stupid, but how often have you sat in a leadership team meeting where you've sat through a 1 hour presentation about the latest branding and the colors that we're going to put on the website? Was that a 1 hour used wisely that was going to deliver your business goals? Or was it just an enjoyable hour drinking coffee and looking at a slide deck for marketing? How does your leadership team operate? Is it systematic? Do you have a strategy? Do you have goals? Key thing for me is, what do you talk about in your leadership meetings every week? Do you talk about where your business goals are, what the issues you are as a business and how you're going to solve them, and if you have any risks that we need to be aware of? Or do you just share updates from each other's departments, which are very nice, but really don't move anything forward with your goals? Get something like EOS, get an operating model that will force you to start thinking about your business goals and your strategy and your tactics and how you're going to actually operate. Come back to the last one we said before, get help. You are definitely not trying to be the most technical person in the room. I'm mentioning a couple of CTOs at the moment. That is their biggest challenge, is that they can't keep up with trying to keep on top of all the technical things that are going on in the business, but they're a technical background and they feel that's part of what they are, that they feel that's the value they bring to the business. My message to them is always, you're not trying to be the technical person in the room, but can you go and find the most technical person and bring them in the room? Hell yes, I can. Well, you're doing your job well. There are lots of CTO forums. Obviously, people who come to this through the London CTO group. CTO Craft's another one. I think there was the RecWorks had done their Meet a Mentor. I'm kind of not sure if that's still active. But don't be afraid to ask really stupid questions. This is one thing I wish I'd had early in my CTO journey, which I never had, was the ability to ask somebody pretty stupid questions, of which no stupid question is generally a stupid question. So get a mentor, kind of get some help. I've talked about the resources that I've used. They're on the slide deck as well. There are plenty of others, but these are ones that I think for me have been the game changers when I've been kind of having to work with businesses on their strategy. And kind of the last piece is that the takeaways really is, think about your role as a CTO. You know, you're not the technical person. You're a leader now, and your job is to help deliver a strategy, but keep it simple. That simple strategy, just getting started on it, I think for a lot of businesses is a massive game changer. You're not going to do it in a day. You're going to have to learn what bad strategy is. Go and read up. Go to Richard Rummel's book. It's an entertaining read about what bad strategy is, and you will nod all the time you're reading it. Keep it really simple. Put some structure around it, and then finally kind of get some help on it as well. I appreciate that was 1 hour of being machine gunned by me. So firstly, well done for getting through 1 hour of being machine gunned by me. The slides are there. If there's any questions in the chat, I'm aware we've just clocked over the hour. I'll pick up those questions afterwards. Maybe we'll put them in the London CTO's chat, in the London CTO Slack group, and have a chat in there. If you need help on strategy, by all means get in touch. It's kind of what I do through my own consultancy business. But other CTOs are available. Talk to people on the London CTOs group, fractional consultants community, and so on. I hope that was, firstly, I apologise for breaking all the rules on slides. I hope that was vaguely useful. Thank you for sitting through it. Yeah, was that useful? First question.
Some really good comments in the chat that certainly suggest a lot of people have got some value from it. For sure.
Brilliant.
Feel free to anyone jump in as well.
I thought that was really interesting, Ken. Thank you for presenting that. It certainly gave me some ideas as to things I can try and things to look at next. So, go today.
Excellent, thank you, Ed. Where it's 2 o'clock, people probably might want to dial off. Any kind of burning questions, or I can pick them up if they dropped in the chat anyway afterwards.
Well, we've got a question. What's your what's your LinkedIn or other contact info? Do you have your? I'll try and grab your LinkedIn profile, Ken. And I'll try
Yes, it's on. If you pick up the slides, it's on the last slide. I think I put my LinkedIn details in there. So take the slides, use them. If you've got any questions, if you're looking at doing kind of a bit of an audit on yourself, I said I've got a sheet that I use. You're welcome to have it. Drop me a note on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to share that with you as well. You can do what you want with it.
We should also be sending a recording as well, or if anyone's interested in the recording, then drop me a line. And Ken, I've also just put your LinkedIn in the chat there as well, just in case anyone wants to jump on that now. But yeah, as you say, it'll be on the slides as well. Okay,
thank you, Jacob. Thank you, RecWorks. Much appreciated for giving me an hour.
Nah, no problem at all. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks very much, Ken. That was a great talk, and appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks all. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.